This last fall, we heard the announcement that Sony will be getting rid of Concord just after a couple of weeks from launching because the player base for it just wasn't there. I mean, I can't remember exactly, but they weren't even reaching 10,000 concurrent players or even just a couple thousand concurrent players. It was a pretty disastrous launch for them, and Sony understood that, all right, we're just going to cut our losses with this. When we tried something, it didn't work. I mean, it lost them hundreds of millions of dollars, but instead of spending more money to try to make it work, they just decided to get rid of it entirely and just use it for a tax write-off or something like that. And we're starting to see something similar coming out of Ubisoft with their game XDefiant that was launched back in May. Because even though it had a pretty promising start, this article right here talking about it, May 23rd, 2024, saying how XDefiant hits 1 million unique players within the first 2.5 hours of launch. So that's pretty good for that. But apparently these people just didn't stick around long enough. And that's why Ubisoft announced that they're going to be shutting down XDefiant. They're making this announcement around 6 months after it was launched. And it's not necessarily means it's going to be shutting down right now. It just means that no one can continue to download it. And you can, if you do have it, you can play up until June. But after that, they're going to cut off all services to it. Ubisoft shuts down XDefiant about a month after executive producer claimed company had no plans to shut down. And I want to talk about that in a moment because I do think it's kind of funny that they made the announcement about a month ago that they don't have any plans to shut it down. And now they're doing this because I do have some thoughts on why I think that was the case. And I don't necessarily attribute malicious motive to it. I think it might just be one hand of the company not talking to the other, something like that. Just people in the company aren't communicating effectively. Ubisoft announced it was shutting down XDefiant as well as closing multiple studios, including in San Francisco and Osaka, that were working on the game, resulting in around 300 layoffs. In a blog post written by Ubisoft's chief studio and portfolio officer, Maria Sofia de Wolbert, the company announced despite an encouraging start, the team's passionate work, and a committed fan base. I'm wondering how committed that fan base is if they're not there enough in order to keep this game from getting shut down. Maybe they're talking about the people who have still played the game, because I think I read it was around 20,000 concurrent players that they're getting for this game consistently, which is not a whole lot, but still, I mean, that's 20,000 people who are playing this game regularly. So maybe those are the committed fans that they're talking about. So a pretty insignificant portion in the whole gaming industry. We've not been able to attract and retain enough players in the long run to compete at the level we aim for in a very demanding free-to-play FPS market. As a result, the game is too far away from reaching the results required to enable further significant investment, and we are announcing that we will be sunsetting it. And I do think it is good on their part to understand that it's just not working out for them and that they can shut it down and better just to cut your losses instead of trying to force it to work. But I think this is not necessarily because they're making a wise business decision, even though I do agree it is a wise business decision. I think if they had the money, then they would continue on with this, and just because this is a huge embarrassment for Ubisoft. But when you look at the stock value for the company right now, it's not sitting in a good position right now, $241 a share. And kind of an interesting note, if you look back all time when the company first went public, October of 2008, it was at $557 a share. So if you bought shares in Ubisoft when they first went public back in 2008 and held on to it till now, then you've lost your money on that one. That kind of happens. But I mean, if you just look at the 5 years, 1 year, year to date, things just haven't been working out for them this last year. So let's see, 6 months, not good. 1 month, still not good. The 5 days, not good. They're up slightly in the 1 day, or at least they're not as far down as if they could have been in the 1 day time frame. So okay, there's that. But I think this is really why Ubisoft is deciding to shut it down, because if everything they've been doing has been performing and their stock value is up, then to be like, okay, we can afford to lose a little bit money keeping this game going to try to force it to work. But since they don't have it, then that's why they're not only shutting this game down, but they're also shutting down the studios, because games fail all the time within this industry, and that doesn't mean studios are going to be shutting down as a result of all that. So when studios are getting shut down, it just goes to show the company is trying to save money in any way they can. She didn't explain concretely. That means that as of today, new downloads, player registrations, and purchases will no longer be available. Season 3 will still launch, and the servers will remain active until June 3rd, 2025, out of appreciation for both our dev teams and who worked on it and the XDefiant active players. So if you have the game, you got till June to play it before it's shut down entirely. Let's see here. So Mark Rubin, the executive producer for this game, he had some thoughts to say on it. I mean, kind of just reiterating many of the same things that she previously said right there. But one thing I thought was kind of interesting was this post that he responded to over on X, where it says, XDefiant is already dead. Ubisoft research team is actively asking their tester to have another in-house test session and give/repeat their feedback. Multiple sources told that it's possible that the game will end its support after Season 4 if they can't get enough players, and this was posted October 14th, so the little over about a month and a half ago. For that, Mark Rubin responded, "To be crystal clear, there are no plans to shut down after Season 4. I've literally been in meetings as of last week to discuss our Year 2 plans, but right now we are super focused on improving the technical experience, which include netcode, and adding more content for Season 3 and 4. We have done very little marketing, so yes, our numbers are down, but that is just to give the team the time to get the game in a better place before we do bigger spends on marketing to bring new players to the game and to bring back players that have left." I do think it's kind of funny that he's responding to a random post like this. I'm not familiar with this person, but maybe there's someone a little bit more prominent who has some pull within this type of sphere. I just aren't familiar with that person, but if not, then it's just him responding to a random post saying that they're going to be shutting down the game, and that's kind of weird right there. But maybe it's possible that he's not just outright lying here, or he knew that they were going to shut down the game. Maybe the higher ups at Ubisoft who were actually planning on shutting this down, which this person got the information from, maybe they're not talking necessarily to Mark Rubin, because you don't necessarily tell someone ahead of time, like, yeah, after this project, I'm going to fire this team behind it because we just can't afford to keep them on or something. I don't think they would do that. I think maybe Mark Rubin understood that there was some problems with it, and they're kind of under the gun, and he maybe felt that it's possible that they could be shutting down the game and that he will be fired or the team will be fired or something like that. So he's under pressure to work on it, but he wasn't given any definitive information that they were shutting it down. So that's why he's saying this sort of thing. But like I said before, if that's the case, I don't know why he'd be responding to posts like this. Maybe he just thought it was bad publicity for them, so he wanted to quash it right there and then. But it could be possible that he just wasn't aware that how bad things actually were for the game, or what the executives over at Ubisoft were actually thinking about the future of the game. Or maybe he's just being kind of pedantic because they're shutting it down after Season 3, and he's saying there was no plans to shut down after Season 4. I mean, I guess that's a possibility too. But one of the things when it comes to this right here, this news about XDefiant shutting down, is it kind of reminds me of what we were hearing just a few weeks ago. Mark Alexis Kute, who's the executive behind the Assassin's Creed franchise over at Ubisoft, said within the AAA gaming sphere, they need to sell around 10 million copies because games cost so much to make. That's how much they need to sell in order to just break even. Not necessarily be good, but just break even. And he was estimated there's only around 10 games in a given year that probably sell that many. And a handful of them are like the sports games that are yearly releases and other things like that. So basically there's only a few games each year that are going to be selling 10 million copies. And to me, that's not really a good way to run your industry. And I made a video at the time talking about that, where I'm saying instead of spending so much on these games, they should probably be cutting the cost of their games. And instead of putting out one $300 million game, put out three $10 million games or six $50 million games. They're probably going to have a lot easier time turning a profit on that one, because even with the XDefiant's launch, because it's a online game, you need to have that consistent player base. It's not there. If it was just a story-based game, then they probably would have been successful. But since it wasn't, then it's a failure for them. But out of curiosity, I decided to look up this list of top selling games of all time, or top selling games in a given year, just to kind of get an idea what hit games used to sell at. I mean, this Wikipedia list isn't necessarily the most conclusive one. This is just a nice, neat list I found, but for the purpose of what I'm trying to explain here, I think it kind of works out. So you see Call of Duty Modern Warfare was the top selling game of 2009 at 5.8 million sales. In 2008, We Play, Mario Kart, We Fit, all those hovering around the 5 million sold mark. Halo 3 was the top selling game of 2007 at 4.8 million. So you get the idea. These are well below that 10 million threshold, but I also want to caveat though that some of these releases, like Halo 3, for instance, I believe that was released in the fall, so it didn't necessarily sell throughout that whole year, but still in the last quarter of the year, they sold 4.8 million copies. But I believe during like the first year of their launch, they sold around 8 million, but even then, still less than that 10 million figure. But take a look at number 9, Assassin's Creed. The first one was sold in 2007 at 1.8 million copies, just under 1.9 million copies. And that's the biggest franchise Ubisoft currently has with their upcoming release, Assassin's Creed Shadows, set to come out early next year. But look at this list I found over on Reddit. It's a Reddit post, so take it with a pinch of salt, but it's just trying to list some of the sales figures. I think it's just kind of nice because it's just a nice, neat list where all these different game sales are listed right here. But if you take a look at the first week of sales, Assassin's Creed 3 is the top one at 3.5 million sales. And if you look at the first 4 months, so the launch period, Assassin's Creed 3 is still the top one at 12 to 13 million sales, followed by Assassin's Creed 4 at 11 to 12 million sales. And then the last couple ones, 5 million, no data it has here for Valhalla, 5 to 6 million for Odyssey, 6 to 7 million for Origins. You get the idea. They're not selling nearly as many copies of these games as what they're saying they need to, even for their biggest franchise. And that's why I'm saying when it comes to Assassin's Creed Shadows, that's probably something that's going to be a failure for Ubisoft. XDefiant had a promising start, but not good enough for them to actually turn a profit. And Assassin's Creed Shadows, it's something that might actually have a promising start because it's from a well-established franchise, but with all the negative publicity surrounding it, and what the executives at the company are saying and what we're seeing in other areas of the company with XDefiant, it's looking like this will probably be a failure. And like I said before, this is an issue that the companies themselves are basically doing to themselves because they don't have to spend as much money to produce these games. They want to make these huge games with all these fancy pre-rendered cutscenes and all this other stuff to it. And they don't need to do that because one thing a lot of gamers want is just a fun game to play. And that's something I think a lot of these studios are missing, so they can go back to try to be more creative and hire better people for the job and just make fun stuff that people want. And as a result, you don't have to spend as much and you can make more money, or you can continue just keep throwing money to try to polish up turds and hoping that that's going to turn a profit for you. But as we're seeing, it's just going to facilitate a slow decline within the industry if more studios continue on like this. So I think the solution, or at least what's going to happen though, is eventually some studios are going to get the idea and just kind of produce games that people want to play. And those are the ones who are going to stick around. Other companies like Ubisoft, they're going to continue on how they're doing right now, at least with the current executives that they have right now. And eventually they're just going to go under at a slower rate. But let me know what you think about all this in the comment section below. And also, if you haven't already, make sure you click that subscribe button if you want to stay up to date with the latest entertainment news. And don't forget to click that like button and share this video out there because it really helps out with the channel. Thank you.